Those are orc ships, and they're blocking our passage. We'll get you as close to the city as we can, and drop you off on the beach. Be wary now. Orcs are on the attack. Undead have closed every route out, and there's a sorcerer on the loose. If we're to get justice for the Counselor, you'll have to keep your wits about you. May the luck of the gods be with you both, Source Hunters.
To start off, I should probably point out that I'm not a huge fan of CRPGs. It's not that I dislike them, but rather that none of them have ever really grabbed my attention much. No, I've never played Baldur's Gate, and I barely managed to start Temple of Elemental Evil and Icewind Dale. You could say that I'm going into this game with a relatively clean palette. Fortunately, this also means that I'll be able to avoid comparing the two games, given that I've never played the one. I backed Larian's CRPG back in April of last year, after watching Sweat and Vinke promise to make the greatest Divinity game yet created. I was already a fan of Divinity from playing Divine Divinity and Dragon Commander, and the showcase of drop-in, drop-out cooperative multiplayer pretty much sealed the deal. After approaching a friend who is a huge fan of the genre, it was settled, and we went money in for a dual copy tier on the game. We noted its original launch date of fall in 2013, and then promptly forgot about the game, as I generally don't enjoy waiting. That's history, though. The question we're here to answer today, as always, is it any good? Divinity Original Sin is a game all about Source, magical energy that everyone believes drives sorcerers mad. It's been banned across the land, which gives rise to the Source Hunters, who hunt those that use Source like a wolf hunts prey. This is where the player comes in, taking control of a pair of Source Hunters dispatched to Syceal to investigate the death of Counselor Jake, an eminent figure who seems to have met his end at the hands of an evil sorcerer. That's what you're given. Divinity makes the point that it is not there to hold the player's hand very early on. After introducing the basic plotline, players are dropped on a beach near the town of Syceal. According to the captain of the ship that was transporting the hunters, orcs have been blockading the town's port, and the drop on the beach was necessary to ensure safety. The adventure that follows is entirely dictated by the players. Harking back to the CRPGs of old, quests are progressed naturally by discovering new information through dialogue and exploration, rather than by running from City A to Dungeon B following a quest marker, a refreshing change in an industry where linearity in RPGs has become the norm. Each questline offers multiple solutions with consequences that match, which allows for a great deal of branching experiences as the story progresses. After wandering the first town for almost 15 hours, I was still finding new threads to follow, and after leaving through the North Gate, was promptly introduced to combat. Combat is turn-based. Original Sin uses a rule set very similar to D&D, with the order of turns being largely based on character initiative. After the turn order is settled, players are free to move, cast spells, and generally beat things skulls in. I admit, the first time I entered the game I expected the traditional adaptation of pen and paper combat to video game combat, but was pleasantly surprised when Original Sin's hidden hand showed up: environmental manipulation. Several effects exist, including fire, poison, water, ice, magma, steam, and ooze. Each of these elements can interact with another element, allowing the players to potentially change the course of a battle by tactically manipulating the battlefield to damage and control enemies. This also keeps combat from stagnating, as enemies can turn the environment against the player just as effectively. Divinity Original Sin also features cooperative play. The game allows players to take control of the second main character of the game in drop-in, drop-out co-op. In my 80 hours of play, I have had very few issues with connection, and cooperative has proved to be an extremely fun way to play the game. Larian has even improved on the cooperative experience by implementing an argument system that allows players to argue on story-altering decisions. After disagreeing, it leads to a game of rock, paper, scissors to decide which way to resolve an issue. Players can even get the edge against opponents by investing in social skills, such as Intimidate or Charm. It should be noted that the characters do not transfer between campaigns, meaning if you wish to join a friend, you will be taking control of one of the two main characters that he created, not the ones that you may have in your own game. There are still quite a few issues that plague Original Sin. Perhaps the biggest issue with the game comes in the form of its mandatory stealth sections. Shortly after entering the second area of the game, players are tasked with entering a mining complex, which houses the game's first invulnerable enemies. Despite being invulnerable, the player is still expected to get through the area, which means using the sneaking mechanic. Sneaking highlights enemy sight cones and slows movement. For a game that, to that point, had allowed us to approach a situation however we pleased, to suddenly turn around and force us through a certain way is jarring and frustrating. Getting caught by the enemy was essentially a death sentence, and given the patrol routes and lack of linger time at any given point on that route, the whole thing felt drawn out and unnecessary. Smaller bugs also remain unfixed. About once per game session, when a friend would connect to the game, the stats of the characters taken over by the joining player would be reset to that of a level 1. While this could be fixed by reloading a save, it was annoying to have to spend more time in loading screens than was absolutely necessary. A few side quests also seem to lack multiple ways of completion. Early in the game, the players are tasked with getting a crowd warmer to switch employers. My companion and I failed the rock-paper-scissors game against the crowd warmer due to having much lower social stats than him, which led to him completely ignoring our requests, thus failing the quest as a whole. As of now, the quest cannot be completed any other way, and there are quests later down the road which rely on its completion, leading us to missing out on potentially valuable experience. While I understand the inclusion of consequences, the inability to complete a later quest due to the failure of another was disappointing, especially when the odds were lined up against us from the very beginning. Problems persist in combat as well. Doorways can prove problematic when targeting enemies with spells. The line of sight on an enemy may seem open, and the spell may indicate that it'll hit, but on occasion we also found our spells hitting a seemingly invisible blocking volume in the doorway, wasting a potentially invaluable turn. Some smaller enemies also prove problematic with targeting. The best example of these is the air elemental mobs that appear around the middle of the game. These mobs are small orbs that float above the ground and dance through the air every few seconds. Targeting requires you to highlight the target, which, when a target so small keeps moving around, can lead to a player clicking and moving rather than shooting off an attack. This is a minor issue, and one that rarely popped up, but when precious AP and turns are wasted because of a mistimed click between idle animation cycles, it can prove pretty frustrating. Divinity Original Sin approaches the RPG genre in a way we haven't seen much since the CRPGs of the late 90s and early 2000s. The thrill of exploration, joy of completing harder puzzles, and satisfaction of seeing a well-planned strategy come together during battle far outweighed the issues that popped up from time to time. With a storyline that took us almost 70 hours to complete on the first playthrough, and plenty of different class setups and other solutions to quests available, I can certainly see myself spending much more time discovering all the outcome branches that Original Sin has to offer. But just one story wouldn't be enough for a CRPG. Divinity also comes packaged with a full editor, the same building tool the developers used to build the base game. The modding community has already accomplished some pretty fantastic stuff, including a mod that allows for 4-player cooperative, with the extra 2 people taking control of the companions the normal players acquire in the game. The massive potential for content generation from such a powerful editor could certainly extend the life of the game far, far beyond the hundreds of hours the base campaign already offers. As I said, I backed Original Sin on Kickstarter last year. I wasn't expecting a whole lot to come of it, maybe a good laugh with a friend as we argued about what to do with a magic seashell on the coast. But what I got far surpassed my expectations in almost every way. Divinity Original Sin from Larian Studios gets a 9 out of 10, and is available now for $39.99 or your regional equivalent. Until next time, stay awesome, and cheers.